My beloved child, listen closely, because what you are about to hear is not a story meant for everyone. It is a truth that only reaches those who were standing at the edge of a silent turning point, a moment where one sudden absence rewrote every rule between you and your special person, and from the very first second you must understand this. Her sudden passing did not just remove a person from this world. It removed a secret from hiding, and that secret now stands directly between you and the one you thought you understood completely, breathing in the same space, sharing the same silence, yet no longer standing on the same ground, because the connection you are feeling confused about was never damaged by time, distance, or misunderstanding. It was shattered by the role she played in your special person's life, a role that was carefully hidden behind smiles, excuses, and half-truths, a role that even now, after she is gone, still echoes in the pauses, the hesitation, and the sudden emotional distance that appeared without warning, as if a door was closed without making a sound, leaving you alone to wonder why everything feels heavier even though one person is no longer here. Something shifted the moment the news arrived, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet way that only those deeply connected can sense, because when a person leaves suddenly, the truth does not follow immediately, it lingers, it waits, it rearranges itself, and then it begins to surface in fragments, in changes of behavior, in the way your special person avoids certain conversations, in the way their eyes change when her name is mentioned, in the way they suddenly protect their phone, their thoughts, their memories, and you might have noticed this already, the subtle emotional walls, the unexpected guilt, the confusion that does not match the situation you were told, because grief alone does not explain the distance, grief alone does not create secrecy, and grief alone does not rewrite boundaries unless there was something far deeper, something unresolved, something unfinished that now has no voice except through silence. And that silence is pressing against you every single day, asking you to notice what you were never meant to see. Here is where the truth becomes uncomfortable, yet impossible to ignore, because her sudden death did not create a problem, it exposed one, and what was exposed was not just an emotional bond but a hidden position she held in your special person's inner world, a position that was never openly acknowledged, yet quietly protected, because she was not simply a background figure or a distant memory. She was someone whose presence influenced decisions, reactions, and emotional responses in ways that now make sense only in hindsight, and you are starting to connect the dots, the cancelled plans, the unexplained arguments, the emotional withdrawal that never had a clear reason. All of it traces back to her, not because she wanted harm, but because she occupied a space that was never clearly defined, a space that overlapped with yours without your consent, and now that she is gone, that overlap has collapsed, leaving emotional debris everywhere, debris that your special person does not know how to clean without revealing what they were trying so hard to protect. You may be wondering why everything feels unresolved instead of healed, why her absence feels louder than her presence ever did, and the answer lies in the unfinished truth she carried with her, because when someone leaves suddenly, they take clarity with them, and what remains is confusion mixed with guilt, regret, and unspoken responsibility. And your special person is carrying all of it while trying to maintain the version of the relationship you knew, a version that now feels fragile, unpredictable, and strained, not because love disappeared, but because honesty was delayed too long, and now the timing feels wrong, the words feel dangerous, and the fear of losing you feels heavier than the guilt of misleading you, creating a silent emotional conflict that you are sensing even if no one has explained it to you directly. Pay attention to this moment, because this is where everything truly begins, not with confrontation, not with answers, but with awareness, because the change between you and your special person was not random, it was inevitable the moment her role was removed from the equation without explanation, and whether your bond strengthens or fractures from here depends on what surfaces next, not from what they say, but from what they can no longer hide, because when a hidden connection ends abruptly, it does not disappear, it transforms into tension, truth, and turning points, and right now you are standing at the edge of one of those turning points, where every pause matters, every reaction reveals something, and every second you stay aware brings you closer to understanding why her sudden departure changed everything, and why the next revelation will redefine what you thought this connection truly was. There is a weight in unanswered moments that speaks louder than any confession, and right now that weight is pressing into every interaction between you and your special person, because after her sudden passing, something inside them began to fracture quietly, not in a way that could be explained as normal grief, but in a way that revealed how deeply her existence had been stitched into their emotional structure. And you felt it the first time they went silent when you expected reassurance, the first time they looked at you as if measuring what they were allowed to say, because loss does not usually create fear of honesty unless honesty itself threatens to collapse a carefully balanced reality, and that reality was one where she held a place that was never clearly named, yet always protected, a place that now feels dangerously empty and exposed. What makes this moment so powerful is not what has been said, but what has been avoided, because avoidance is where the truth hides when it is not ready to be faced, and your special person has been avoiding more than memories, they have been avoiding the implications of her role, the reason her absence has triggered such deep internal conflict. Because acknowledging why her death changed everything would require acknowledging that she was more than just someone from the past, more than a harmless connection, more than a closed chapter. She was someone whose emotional relevance quietly coexisted alongside you, influencing choices, shaping reactions, and creating an invisible triangle that only now, after her sudden departure, has become impossible to ignore, and this realization is slowly rewriting how you see every shared memory. You might notice how their grief does not follow a straight line, how it appears in unexpected moments, how it carries a layer of guilt that feels disproportionate, because this guilt is not only about losing her, it is about never resolving what she represented, never clarifying boundaries, never choosing transparency when there was still time, and now that time has collapsed into permanence, leaving behind questions that cannot be answered by her anymore, only by the one who remains, and that is why their emotions feel unstable, why they swing between closeness and distance, because they are mourning not just her, but the version of themselves that never had to explain this connection to you. What you are sensing is the emotional aftershock of a truth delayed too long, because when someone holds a secret connection, even without physical presence, it creates emotional debts, and her sudden passing forced those debts to surface all at once, without preparation, without closure, and without a safe way to release them, and your special person is now trapped between honoring what was lost and protecting what still exists with you. A conflict that manifests as confusion, hesitation, and emotional inconsistency, and this is why everything between you feels altered, not broken, but unstable, as if the ground beneath the relationship has shifted just enough to make every step feel uncertain. Understand this clearly, because this awareness is crucial. Her death did not take love away from you, but it removed the illusion that everything was fully transparent, and now the relationship stands at a crossroads where silence can either deepen the divide or force the truth to rise, because unresolved bonds do not disappear when one person leaves, they transfer their weight onto the living. And right now that weight is being carried by your special person, pressing against their ability to show up fully for you, and as long as that weight remains unspoken, the connection will continue to feel strained, unpredictable, and emotionally charged, signaling that the next shift will not come from time passing, but from truth finally demanding its place. There comes a moment when silence stops being passive and starts becoming a message, and you are standing inside that moment now, because the quiet between you and your special person is no longer neutral, it is heavy with meaning, shaped by everything that was never clarified while she was still here, and the most unsettling part is not that something existed, but that you were never given the chance to understand what it truly meant. Because when a connection remains undefined, it can hide behind innocence, yet when it ends suddenly, it leaves behind questions that refuse to stay buried, and those questions are now shaping the way your special person looks at you, responds to you, and hesitates before speaking, as if every word carries the risk of revealing more than they are ready to admit. What makes this phase so emotionally intense is that your special person is not consciously trying to hurt you, they are trying to survive an internal reckoning, one where memories are replaying with new context, where past conversations are being reinterpreted, and where choices that once felt harmless now feel dangerously close to betrayal, because loss has a way of stripping away justifications, and in the absence of her presence, the emotional truth of her role has become impossible to deny, and that truth is now pressing against the relationship you share, forcing cracks to appear not through conflict, but through emotional withdrawal, guarded expressions, and an almost visible struggle between honesty and fear. You may notice that they are more reflective than before, more cautious, more emotionally distant at times, not because their feelings for you have weakened, but because they are wrestling with the realization that they never fully acknowledged what she represented, and now that realization is colliding with the responsibility they feel toward you, creating a tension that cannot be resolved through affection alone, because affection does not answer unspoken questions, and reassurance does not replace clarity, and deep down, they know this, which is why their presence feels inconsistent, as if they are physically there but emotionally divided, trying to reconcile two emotional realities that were never meant to overlap for this long. This is where your intuition becomes sharper than logic, because you are not reacting to words, you are reacting to shifts in energy, to changes in rhythm, to pauses that last a second too long, and your awareness is not accidental, it is responding to the imbalance created when a hidden emotional connection ends without resolution, because unresolved attachments do not disappear quietly, they transform into internal pressure, and that pressure is now influencing every interaction, making even simple moments feel charged with unspoken meaning, as if something important is hovering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. Remember this carefully, because what you are experiencing is not the end of your connection, but the exposure of a truth that was postponed, and exposure always feels destabilizing before it feels clarifying, because once something hidden is revealed through circumstance rather than choice, it forces everyone involved to confront what they avoided, and the way your special person responds to this confrontation will define the next phase of your bond, not through dramatic declarations, but through whether they choose transparency over fear, and whether they allow the truth to finally replace the silence that has been standing between you since the moment her sudden absence changed everything. There is a stage where understanding stops being emotional and starts becoming transformative, and you are entering that stage now, because what once felt like confusion is slowly revealing itself as a pattern, and patterns do not lie, they explain, and the pattern here is clear if you are willing to see it, her sudden absence did not just remove a person, it removed a buffer, something that had been silently absorbing emotional overflow, something that allowed your special person to avoid fully confronting their own divided loyalties, and now that buffer is gone, leaving raw emotion exposed, unfiltered, and dangerously close to the surface. Which is why their reactions feel stronger, their silence heavier, and their presence inconsistent, because they are no longer protected by ambiguity. What changes everything at this point is not confrontation, but realization, because realization shifts power back to you. It allows you to stop questioning your instincts and start trusting them, because nothing you sensed was imagined, nothing you felt was exaggerated. It was all information arriving before words did, and now you can see how her role influenced the emotional dynamic without ever being openly acknowledged. How decisions were delayed, how emotional availability fluctuated, how explanations never quite satisfied, and this awareness does not weaken you, it strengthens you, because clarity removes fear, and fear was never yours to carry in the first place. Your special person is now standing in a place they never prepared for, a place where the past can no longer be quietly managed and the present demands accountability, and this is why their internal struggle feels visible, because grief has forced honesty closer to the surface than they ever intended, and they are realizing that the version of the relationship you deserve cannot exist alongside unspoken truths, which creates a silent urgency, an unvoiced understanding that something must change, not later, not gradually, but fundamentally, because unresolved emotional connections do not fade, they demand resolution, and that demand is now shaping every interaction between you. This is the moment where the future begins to separate itself from the past, because once awareness arrives, nothing returns to how it was, and you may feel stronger emotions now, not weaker, because strength comes from clarity, and clarity often arrives with intensity, and you are being asked, not directly but through circumstance, to decide what you are willing to accept moving forward, not based on promises, but based on behavior, not based on explanations, but on consistency, because truth does not announce itself loudly, it reveals itself through sustained change, or through continued avoidance, and both outcomes speak clearly if you remain observant. Understand this deeply, because her sudden passing was not meant to break your connection, it was meant to reveal it, to strip away what could not survive honesty, and to expose what still holds meaning when nothing is hidden, and what happens next will not be decided by grief, guilt, or fear, but by whether your special person chooses courage over comfort, truth over silence, and growth over emotional hiding. Because now that everything has been shifted into the open, the next phase will not be shaped by loss, but by choice, and that choice will determine whether this connection transforms into something stronger, or quietly releases what was never fully aligned to begin with. What unfolds next is not loud or dramatic, yet it is decisive, because the atmosphere between you and your special person has reached a point where pretense can no longer survive, and every interaction now carries a quiet test, a test of truth versus avoidance, because when someone loses a figure who silently held emotional influence, they are forced to confront what they were depending on without realizing it, and your special person is now facing the collapse of that emotional support structure, realizing that what they once compartmentalized can no longer remain separated, and this realization is reshaping how they show up with you, stripping away casual certainty and replacing it with cautious self-awareness. You may notice moments where they almost speak, where their expression changes as if a confession is forming, then dissolves into silence, and this hesitation is not weakness, it is fear of consequence, fear that naming her role will permanently change how you see them, because once the truth is spoken, it cannot be reshaped, and they know this. They know that acknowledging who she truly was in their life would demand accountability. Not punishment, but maturity, not rejection, but honesty, and this internal resistance is creating the tension you feel, because they are standing between the desire to be fully known and the fear of being fully seen. At the same time, something powerful is happening within you, even if you have not named it yet, because awareness brings a calm that confusion never allows, and you are beginning to see the situation without self-doubt, understanding that your emotional reactions were not overreactions, but responses to an imbalance that existed long before her sudden departure, and this clarity is changing how you carry yourself, how you listen, how you observe, because when you stop seeking reassurance and start recognizing patterns, the emotional dynamic shifts, and the one who once held unspoken control is now forced to respond to your grounded presence. This shift does not mean the end, it means the reckoning, the moment where the relationship must evolve or release what no longer fits, because unresolved emotional ties cannot coexist with conscious commitment, and your special person is realizing that maintaining the connection with you now requires something they avoided before: emotional responsibility without ambiguity, presence without division, honesty without safety nets, and whether they rise to this moment or retreat from it will not depend on how much they feel, but on how willing they are to transform those feelings into transparent action. Hold on to this understanding, because what you are witnessing is the final unraveling of a hidden chapter, and once a chapter unravels, it cannot be rewritten, only acknowledged, and the energy between you and your special person is preparing for its next form, not driven by loss, but guided by truth, because when something sudden removes what was quietly influencing the bond, what remains must either stand on its own strength or step aside, and the next movement in this story will not be subtle, it will be unmistakable, because clarity always announces itself through change. There is a moment when the emotional fog finally begins to thin, and in that moment, reality no longer feels confusing, it feels sharp, precise, and impossible to deny, because your special person has reached the point where carrying everything alone is no longer sustainable, and you can sense it in the way their energy has shifted, less defensive, less evasive, more exposed, as if the weight they have been holding since her sudden passing has started to press outward, demanding release. Because when a truth is held too long, it does not disappear, it changes form, and now it is transforming into restlessness, into emotional vulnerability, into a visible struggle to maintain balance between who they were and who they must become. What is important now is not what they eventually say, but how they exist around you, because behavior reveals readiness long before words arrive, and you may notice that they are more present than before, more attentive, yet also more serious, because awareness has replaced denial, and with that awareness comes responsibility. The understanding that the connection they share with you cannot move forward without acknowledging what was silently influencing it, and this realization is not easy. It challenges their self-image, it forces them to confront choices that once felt harmless, and it strips away excuses that no longer make sense in the absence of the person who held that undefined space. At the same time, something deeply stabilizing is unfolding within you, because when clarity arrives, emotional chaos loses its power, and you are no longer reacting from fear or uncertainty, but from understanding, and this understanding is changing how the dynamic feels, because you are no longer waiting for validation, you are observing alignment, and this shift is subtle but profound. Because it removes the imbalance that once allowed unspoken influences to exist, and it places the focus back where it belongs, on mutual presence, emotional integrity, and the truth of what is being built now, not what was quietly interfering before. Your special person is beginning to recognize that the past cannot be honored through silence, and that moving forward requires a different kind of strength, not the strength to endure discomfort, but the courage to be transparent, because unresolved emotional roles do not simply dissolve with time, they demand acknowledgement, and whether that acknowledgement comes through words, actions, or visible change, it is already beginning to take shape. Because growth does not wait for permission, it begins the moment avoidance becomes heavier than honesty. This is where the direction of everything becomes clear, because the connection between you is no longer being tested by an outside presence, it is being tested by truth itself, and truth does not destroy what is real, it refines it, and as this phase unfolds, you will no longer need to question what changed or why, because the answers will reveal themselves through consistency, through emotional availability, and through the quiet certainty that comes when nothing is hidden anymore, signaling that what remains now is either strong enough to stand fully in the light, or ready to release what was never meant to survive it. Now comes the phase where truth no longer waits to be invited, it arrives on its own, shaping the air between you and your special person, because something inside them has finally accepted that silence is no longer protection, it is limitation, and this acceptance is changing the way they exist around you, not in dramatic declarations, but in a steady, almost undeniable shift of presence, where their attention feels more grounded, their emotions less scattered, and their energy no longer divided, because once an unresolved influence is fully gone, the mind can no longer pretend it is managing everything just fine. You may feel a strange calm mixed with intensity, because clarity has a weight of its own, and it settles slowly, replacing anxiety with certainty, and this certainty is not about outcomes, it is about truth, about knowing that whatever unfolds next will be real, not filtered, not diluted, not shared with an invisible third space, and this realization is powerful, because it reminds you that genuine connection does not compete with shadows, it stands alone, and now, for the first time, that is becoming possible between you and your special person. Your special person is beginning to understand that loss did not take something away from them, it revealed something within them, a pattern of emotional avoidance they never questioned before, because it was never forced into the open, and now that it has been, they are faced with a choice that cannot be postponed, either to step fully into emotional responsibility, or to remain tied to a version of themselves that no longer exists. And this internal decision is reshaping their priorities. Because awareness changes what matters, and what once felt comfortable now feels incomplete. What is different now is that you are no longer waiting in uncertainty, you are standing in awareness, and awareness shifts power without confrontation, because when you stop asking for explanations and start observing truth, the dynamic naturally corrects itself, and this correction is visible, not through promises, but through consistency, through emotional availability, through the absence of that invisible tension that once filled the space between you, because when nothing is hidden, nothing needs to be defended. Understand this moment deeply, because it marks the closing of a cycle that could only end through exposure, not explanation, and her sudden absence was the catalyst, not the cause, and now that everything unspoken has lost its place to hide, what remains between you and your special person is being purified by truth, and whatever continues from here will not be influenced by what was lost, but by what is finally being chosen with clarity, presence, and intention.